Now, based off the title of this video, you might have thought that I've inhaled some weird tyre smoke, before then quickly asking me, hey, can I have some? But hold on, what we saw in practice really gives an indication that Williams look pretty strong and could give Red Bull a bit of a spook. Yes, I know it may be preemptive to say that, but in the spirit of Christian Horner, I'm prepared to give it a go! Let me start by clarifying that these observations stem from the initial practice sessions and may not hold true for the entire season, or even the next couple of weeks, but early data does give us a glimpse of which teams are finding it easier to configure their cars, and which ones still have a lot of work to do. Red Bull, for example, are particularly pinning their hopes on upgrades working for them in Melbourne, with them bringing a colossal amount of upgrades. 17 of them! None of them track-specific. This is a really aggressive early season approach considering we are in the final year of these regulations. It feels like Red Bull's hurling everything, including the kitchen sink, to try and make sure the RB21 is up to snuff. And based on the early judgment calls from both Lawson and Verstappen, the answer is that no, they're not working. Well, at least not as well as they hoped. Hang on a minute, Law. Why are you talking about Red Bull? Williams, that's the topic of this video. You're doing one of your Carlos Sainz revenge arcs videos again. Well, I do believe that Carlos has something to do with this narrative, and not just for the fact that he used to drive for them. But it is my belief that this year has seen a noticeable shift in the competitive landscape 1 year earlier than expected, particularly highlighted by how Williams and Red Bull have performed thus far and what they brought to the table after pre-season testing. The Williams FW47, it emerged as a formidable contender within the midfield, and that its performance in testing, it's steadily being justified as more and more information and facts really come to light, reflecting significant technical advancements and strategic enhancements compared to this time last year. And most importantly, it's not gone in the wall. At least not yet. In contrast, you get Red Bull bringing so many upgrades to the table that it's effectively a B-spec car before round one's even finished. And even though I do appreciate and marvel at the fact that they are able to bring this many parts to the first Grand Prix of the season, it really goes to show the amount of resources and the stark difference between Red Bull and Williams. The fact is, though, is that they are scrabbling around with everything they've got, chucking everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, they are going to be relying more and more on Max Verstappen to make up for the shortfall, and hoping that Liam Lawson can acclimate himself quickly. But as Liam Lawson said in many interviews as of this recording, that even though he is settling into the team quite nicely, put simply, the car is not fast enough. Which is why I came up with this video, because it's now giving me a little bit of a narrative that I really did not foresee happening this quickly. That perhaps in the first couple of races, as Red Bull get their act together, Williams may have a car, albeit down on outright pace, might be easier to set up than the RB21 machine and prepare for a Grand Prix weekend more efficiently. Because as has been made quite clear by the RB20 last year, and Max Verstappen saying in many interviews, that having time in free practice to get your setup down and to refine the car itself and how you're going to perform is vital. Because we saw far too many times last year that Friday was spent with the Red Bull car down in like 14th or 15th, Max lamenting the fact that the operational window was so minuscule, and then eventually they do crack it overnight, they then improve, they then get back up to the top again, only to then not make as much of an impact as they had hoped. And if any other competitor gets a handle on them, including the midfield, it could make Red Bull's time even worse. I'm not just suggesting Williams could be a thorn in their side, it could be the likes of Alpine, it could be the likes of Sauber if Nico Hülkenberg's performance is anything to go by. But mind you, pay attention to that, because if any team is more likely than anyone else to go for a glory run, it's gonna be Sauber. And then don't get me started on the racing bulls. Yuki Tsunoda and Isaac Hadjar pulling that kind of a stunt. But seriously, this contrast between Williams' relative ease in setup and Red Bull's early struggles could influence the results of the Australian Grand Prix and set the tone for the opening flyaway races. But I must remind you, I am not saying that Williams is going to beat Red Bull over the course of 2025. And if I catch you typing that in the comments, I know that you will have definitely not been paying attention to my opening argument. And if you have been paying attention, I do thank you very much, and maybe you could like the video to show that you are supportive of my findings and theories and my yapping. And better yet, maybe add in the comments a chili emoji to really show that you've gotten this far. And speaking of chilies, Carlos Sainz has made it clear that he joined Williams not as a temporary measure before returning to the elite. He's doing this because he believes in the team's potential, and so far, it's really paying dividends. And even though it's only practice and testing that we've seen thus far, the work that Williams have undertaken with both the Spaniard and James leading the charge has been nothing short of remarkable, turning around the fate of a team which looked destined not too long ago to go belly up. And even though when I first started talking about this a few months ago, it seemed like pie-in-the-sky thinking and wishful thinking at that, more often than not, I am seeing more and more evidence and proof and examples that what I am trying to say to you all is something that can be backed up and then shown in real time on the track. That this Williams car is probably the most settled car that the team has produced in several years, and one that is likely not to catch the drivers out off guard in the middle of a corner and send them spearing into the barrier and costing the team several millions of dollars. And even though Valves is really doing well at managing expectations, the very fact that the car is looking far more stable than last year's bodes well for the team's future, even before the regulation change. And what I'm about to share with you was not challenged by Sainz's old boss at all either, because when asked what James had said about Carlos and whether Fred found it surprising or new to him, he just simply said, nope, which was something right here. Ahem. I believe in the work we've done across the winter, but it's just practice, and we're running, I'm sure, a slightly different program to some of our colleagues. We've done a good job, there's no doubt about it, and Carlos is in a great state. But we also have to be realistic. The top 4 giants of the sport now, and that includes McLaren in that, I'd love to say we'll break into that, but that's not the reality of where we are today. Our job is to make sure we keep progressing. I think you're going to be seeing the field at the closest it's ever been, and it'd be great to be scratching on that door, being irritating from time to time. And as for Carlos, he's been to a number of organizations, so he understands different elements, and he's been across a number of drivers we would all consider world championship material. That, and in terms of pace, we knew he was quick, but I've been really impressed with his ability to interact with our aero team or our engineers and bring them on a journey as well. Now, that last part in particular is key to why this Williams car is as good as it is. And by the way, Fred also mentioned in that same press conference that he never knew a driver so determined to know what his teammate was doing and then try and best him. That his dynamic with Charles Leclerc was completely new to him, and it really goes to show you, Sainz is a really underrated driver, and that's why I'm so proud of what he was able to do at McLaren at the same time, and then also for a little bit Renault. And actually, when you really look back at it, Sainz experienced at Renault with Ricciardo coming in to replace him exactly the same thing that he saw at Ferrari when Hamilton came in to replace him. So it's happened to him twice now. But back to the aero. This has been a key problem for the team in recent years. In fact, you could argue for over a decade. Like it or not, Williams had been a long-term sufferer of aerodynamic uncertainty and unpredictability. Williams tends to just produce a really rapid down-the-straight boat, which sure, it gets all of the speed trap records at pretty much every single Grand Prix you go to, but when you show it a corner, it will just go, "Aah!" and then suddenly spin off, and then just crash the hopes and dreams of many rookies and many drivers, including Nicholas Latifi and Logan Sargent. I think those days are gone now, and it could easily be down to the feedback that Sainz has given the aerodynamic department, brought to the team, to maybe steer the progress that was being made before the Spaniard arrived. I'm more than happy to explain why I think this, that finally, Williams have produced a car which is aerodynamically sound, and is a car that can give both Sainz and Albon exactly what they need. Sure, it's not the paciest pacey car out there, but it's certainly a dab hand compared to its previous models. I mean, I think you could confidently say that it's a lot more settled than what the RB21 is at this precise moment. It could easily change, but in the here and now, Williams' car looks a bit more planted. You could think of this brand new Williams car like a well-engineered bicycle. It's more stable and easier handling, and it will allow for a faster, more confident ride. because Williams has refined the FW47's design, including that revised rear suspension package that they got from their supplier Mercedes, as well as the power unit. This update aims to improve the car's contact patch with the track in high-speed corners especially, enhancing both stability and predictability for the driver. Not to mention, it really adds to the improvement in terms of rear-end stability on an aerodynamic basis as well as you get all of the extra louvers, cooling patches, what have you on the engine cover. There are many little refinements that we have been seeing that could just stabilize the overall fundamental way the air goes over the car, therefore it makes it less twitchy. You're not sacrificing straight line speed either, and therefore you're less likely in those high-speed corners to just suddenly get the car, just look at a little bit of gust of wind and suddenly just wet its pants or something like that. Williams have laser focused into the problems that we saw with the FW46, as well as, most importantly, they got the car out on time and on the weight limit, because last year's car was 15 kilos overweight. And if you go by Martin Brundle's storied measure of you lose 0.3 for every 10 kilos of weight that you got, Williams have managed to gain back easily half a second, which would then thrust it into the midfield, and then from there, you've got yourself a pretty sound car there, my friend. And I also noticed a little observation from the Team Talk podcast, which is the interview show where Carlos and Alex just banter around for half an hour, that Alex felt that he pretty much given everything that he could possibly give from his time at Red Bull, and that Carlos Sainz coming in was a breath of fresh air that he could find inspiration from as well. So basically, Alex had integrated himself into Williams so much that he just realized that he needed a little bit of an extra perspective from someone who was already experienced, and look no further than Carlos. So Alex will be motivated, he will be fired up, sure. And even though the team is grounded in the belief that any team could throw a spanner in their works, or anyone else could really provide a surprise for them in the field, they at least have a car which works for them, far less likely to pull stunts on them, and therefore make them become cautious within certain corners. You know, that's most important as well. If you can actually just push the car to the limit, you can get extra lap time. Because I wouldn't be surprised that both Alex, Logan and Franco did have to measure themselves, limit themselves in terms of outright potential, not go above 100% because they knew that they would put it in the wall, and yeah, their repair bill was really bad last year. They didn't want to make it worse. So that limitation, gone, I reckon. And that confidence is so important, and if it continues to improve, it will snowball over the races ahead. And even though I still believe Alpine will outpace them in terms of the Constructors' Championship this year, it won't be down to the fact that the car just simply will plateau. No. I think Williams are still measured in their approach for 2026. They'll allow Alpine to go for the glory run. Red Bull will obviously push away from them in the fullness of time. They'll get their act together with the RB21. My point is, right now, in these first few races, which last year proved crucial to Max Verstappen's championship campaign, this could easily set the tone for what we could see in the next few months or maybe couple of years. And even though Friday practice is still something that we can't fully measure expectations for a full race, it can give you more things than a preseason testing campaign, because FP2 looks at race runs. And the race produced a chart which handily compared Williams to the top 4 teams, them also believing the team had something in their pocket. Albon's race pace is right there in the mix, and Carlos is not far behind Verstappen as well, which is partially why I wanted to make this video, because in stark contrast, Red Bull are not looking nearly as stable, and we all know how much Christian Horner likes his stability and continuity. Because from what I've seen on social media, as well as analyses, statistics, interviews with the drivers and what have you, Red Bull are being pulled over the coals right now, and that Liam Lawson especially, oh, he's being dragged through the dirt, eviscerated by Crofty, unfairly by the way. Liam is getting probably a lot of scorn from multiple fandoms that he indirectly wronged for having replaced or snubbed their particular driver. But anyway, the RB21 is indicating that Red Bull, they're in a phase of adaptation, seeking to optimize their new design concept and just have a period of adjustment that may temporarily hinder their performance. And whilst this is a reasonable and mature way to go about things, it does provide an opportunity for rivals to capitalize, as well as some of the more potent midfield operators. I do believe that what they're doing right now with the RB21 could come good later in the year, that they could finally rectify the woes and inflexibility of the RB20. I am not writing off Red Bull entirely, entirely. There is potential and hope that they could get right back up in there with Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren toward the end of the year, and mean that we could get a three-way battle that goes all the way to Abu Dhabi and everybody is happy, and that Max Verstappen doesn't have to do all the work. But in the here and now, based on what we've seen thus far from pre-season testing and practice, Red Bull have not found the secret stuff needed to get the car back to where it was this time last year, where it looked dominant. But fortunately for the team, Max is willing to go along with this for the time being a little bit more open-minded and indicating that he is appreciating the fact that his feedback has finally been heeded, something that he has been trying to say for the last year or so, and Checo for the last 2. But at the same time, this damage limitation is already beginning within the Red Bull media pen. Just today, I have seen interviews that Christian Horner and Helmut Marko have been undertaking with the media, and they have been doing everything they can to go, oh, don't pay attention to the times or anything like that. So it's merely an indicator. It's not a trend. Oh, and then Helmut Marko just saying, oh, we're not preparing for the rain. Don't expect us to have a rain setup because you never know what's going to happen. Although the Australian weather forecasters are now saying it's guaranteed to rain substantially. And look, if you're a Red Bull fan, I am not having a dig at your team. What I am trying to say is that I appreciate that the time and effort they've been partaking in behind the scenes to get this car right is commendable. It shows what resources they have and the resilience of their workers. But the fact of the matter is that what they've been doing has not fully worked. And this could benefit some of the midfield teams like Alpine and Williams who are going all out, especially Alpine. They're not thinking long term, they're thinking short term. So you could get some early season scalps, which will only cause Liam Lawson's stock to go tumbling down even further, unfairly so, because let's be real, Liam Lawson is right there in case Max Verstappen bails at short notice. Red Bull needs some sort of stability and continuity, and Liam Lawson is it. So whilst the team is busy steadying the ship and producing a consistent car, Williams has already steadied theirs, and it could be one in many teams who could walk up to Horner and go boo. But seriously, the contrasting situations between these two cars, this could really set the tone for the opening races of 2025. That it could give Max Verstappen a major headache in terms of his championship defence, akin to the headaches that Lando Norris was dealing with in the first few races. Him admitting that McLaren not getting fully up to speed with their car before Miami really harmed his championship efforts because he ended up over 50 points behind by the time they got to America for the first time. Max Verstappen could suffer the same issue if he's not as effective or as potent as McLaren or Ferrari, and the best he can hope for is maybe getting a cheeky snifter on the podium until the RB21 is fully developed to the time where the operational window is better. Williams could easily be a thorn in their side, taking vital points away from them, especially in the constructors if Lawson is also struggling with his own lot and getting up to speed with that as well. And when you consider that Helmut Marko has essentially told Lawson, don't touch anything, stay on your lane, just be there in the second seat, okay? That's not exactly hospitable now, is it? But what is very encouraging to see at Williams is that they are not allowing themselves to buy into the hype, that they're not allowing it to get the better of them, though they understand it could change rapidly on a race-by-race basis. Another midfield team could set the cat amongst the pigeons, but one thing is for sure, going into this season, Williams look far more comfortable than Red Bull do. And if Carlos and Alex are looking to chip away at the front runners with some cheeky 7th or 8th or a podium should there be retirements further up the grid, this is a good start. And to make things all the more spicier, you've only got to look at the Williams lineup. Both Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon are Red Bull junior driver refugees. They are graduates of the program, and therefore they might have a little bit of skin in the game in terms of really adding to this particular narrative of Williams versus Red Bull in these opening couple of races. Their success with Williams could underscore the potential consequences of Red Bull's past driver decisions, as well as them not taking the advice seriously of both Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez when they actually raised the alarm initially. I am quite certain that both Carlos and Alex are keen to use their energies to put team politics aside and have a chance to give their former team boss a bit of a fright, with a team that is going places after all these years of struggling. And even though you might be questioning this motivation and that Sainz and Albon wouldn't be this petty, they do have a good reason to look at Red Bull and want to justify that they were wrong to drop them when they did, and use them as commodities for the betterment of Red Bull racing in the long run. In Carlos Sainz's example, he was sent off to Renault as part of a deal with that organisation to make sure that Toro Rosso could be rid of those awful power units, and therefore they could start off the Honda relationship on a good note and then bed it in for Red Bull the following year. And as for Alex Albon, he essentially was there because not only was he a pretty potent driver, and in 2019 he was really good, 2020 wasn't all that bad actually, but you've only got to look at the situation at the time. He was partly there to keep the Thai side of the Red Bull global business rather sweet. But then you've also got to look at the situation of what was going on in the driver market at the time. No, I'm sorry, Alex Albon could not compete with Checo when he became available. So, yeah, Alex was thrown to the lions in that regard. Because you got to admit, both drivers have flourished outside the Red Bull ecosystem, contributing significantly to Williams' resurgence. Sainz's immediate impact was evident during post-season testing in Abu Dhabi, where he quickly adapted to the FW46 and then went in some headway to the FW47, impressing everybody there with his speed and feedback, and actually producing things that even the team didn't expect, really going above and beyond. And Albon himself has benefited in seeing Sainz arrive on his doorstep with a guy that he gets on with famously. Both men don't want drama because they experienced drama at Red Bull, that they just want to make sure that Williams restores itself to the team it deserves to be. One of the heritage teams, which will really work well with the ethos of James Vowles, that his mission is to get Williams back to the top. And these two drivers, they're on the same page. They're not out for their own personal glory. And what will make this work is that this seems to be a really authentic stance from both drivers, instead of it being enforced strictly at McLaren, and then Toto just looking at George and Kimi and hoping for the best. In summary, early indications suggest that Williams has effectively addressed past issues and is building a platform for future success. Their car now appears more compliant and easier to set up, and could easily disturb the status quo of the frontrunners at times, especially when compared to the initial RB21, which still requires fine-tuning to reach its full potential. So while Max Verstappen's talent will likely help mitigate Red Bull's current challenges, Williams could seize any early opportunities to score some valuable points and get an advantage with their own battles in the midfield. But yes, this could be another developing narrative which makes 2025 out to be a fantastic season, and the poetry and motion of these two drivers at Williams who used to race for Red Bull represent that team, and them going up against the actual team itself and then proving them that they were wrong to dump them when they did. Oh, it's going to be magic. Hopefully with the FW47, at times they might be able to show Christian Horner what they're worth. And speaking of worth, could Verstappen's own worth be one of the factors that could work against him, finding another team to call home other than Red Bull? Should that relationship grow sour with time? To find out why I think Mercedes closing the door on Verstappen practically is a real blow for his long-term future if Red Bull really goes south, watch this video next, straight after this one.